The wedding ring slipped from her trembling fingers and landed in the rough, dirt-stained hand of a poor farmer. For a heartbeat, the entire grand ballroom fell silent. Hundreds of wealthy guests stared in disbelief. The bride looked into the stranger's eyes and whispered 3 words that changed both their lives forever. "Marry me, please." No one understood why. Not the guests, not the reporters, not even the man standing in front of her. But hidden behind the glittering chandeliers was a secret powerful enough to destroy one of the richest families in the country. And before sunrise, someone would already be planning a murder. The morning had begun long before sunrise. A cold mist covered the endless wheat fields outside the quiet village of Green Hollow. Ethan Carter wiped sweat from his forehead as he repaired an old irrigation pipe with rusty tools that should have been replaced years ago. His hands were rough. His boots were torn. His shirt carried patches his late mother had sewn before she passed away 3 years earlier. The small farmhouse behind him leaned slightly to one side. Rain leaked through the roof every winter. Yet Ethan never complained. Instead, he smiled at every neighbor he met. Old Mrs. Jenkins struggled to carry firewood. Before she could ask, Ethan lifted the heavy bundle onto his own shoulders. "You'll hurt your back," she said. He laughed softly. "Then I'll rest tomorrow." She smiled sadly. "You always help everyone." He shrugged. "Maybe one day someone will need to help me." Neither of them knew how soon that day would come. Inside the farmhouse, Ethan carefully counted the money hidden in a small metal box. $47. That was everything he owned. The bank had already sent 3 foreclosure notices. If he failed to pay within 2 weeks, the land his father had spent 30 years cultivating would belong to someone else. He stared at the faded family photograph hanging above the fireplace. His father stood proudly beside freshly harvested wheat. His mother smiled while holding a much younger Ethan. "We'll keep the farm," Ethan whispered. "I promise." His voice cracked. There was no one left to hear it. That afternoon, Ethan loaded fresh vegetables into his old pickup truck. Tomatoes, corn, potatoes, carrots. The harvest had been small, but every dollar mattered. His destination was Rivergate City, 2 hours away. The city's weekly farmers market always brought better prices. As he drove along the winding highway, sunlight spilled across the rolling hills. He had no idea this ordinary trip would become the last normal day of his life. Sometimes destiny doesn't knock. Sometimes it crashes into you. Across the city, inside one of the tallest glass towers, another life was quietly falling apart. Sophia Harrington stared through the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Rivergate. Luxury surrounded her. Designer furniture, rare paintings, crystal chandeliers, a skyline worth billions. Yet she looked more trapped than privileged. Behind her, a woman's voice cut through the silence. "The guests are arriving." Sophia didn't turn around. "I know." Her personal assistant, Emily, hesitated. "You still have time." "No." Sophia closed her eyes. "I ran yesterday." Emily lowered her head. "And my father found me before I reached the airport." Silence filled the room. Emily carefully adjusted Sophia's wedding dress. It was breathtaking. Handmade lace, diamond embroidery, worth nearly $500,000. Yet Sophia hated every stitch. She looked into the mirror. Instead of a bride, she saw a prisoner. 3 months earlier, her father, billionaire industrialist Richard Harrington, had made a decision. "You'll marry Victor Sterling." It wasn't a request. Victor came from another billionaire family. The marriage would merge 2 corporate empires worth nearly $20 billion. Sophia refused. Richard remained calm. Then he quietly placed hospital bills on the table. Her grandmother's treatment. Millions of dollars. Without Richard's financial support, the hospital would stop treatment. "You have 1 week." Sophia cried all night. She finally agreed. Not because she loved Victor, because she loved her grandmother. Victor Sterling entered the bridal suite without knocking. He adjusted his expensive watch. "Ready?" She looked away. "As ready as I'll ever be." Victor smirked. "You'll learn." She frowned. "Learn what?" "That feelings don't matter." He stepped closer. "In our world, marriages are investments." She met his eyes. Cold, empty, arrogant. At that moment, Sophia realized something terrifying. She wasn't marrying a man. She was becoming property. But someone inside the wedding hall already knew. The marriage would never happen. Rivergate's farmers market buzzed with life. Children laughed. Musicians played cheerful tunes. Fresh bread filled the air with warm aromas. Ethan sold vegetables with his usual friendly smile. Business was slow. By noon, he had earned only $60. Still, he gave an elderly homeless veteran a free bag of potatoes. "You need these more than I do." The old man stared. "Son, take them. I can't pay." "You already did." The veteran looked confused. "You reminded me my father always said kindness grows better than wheat." The old man fought back tears. "You'll be rewarded someday." Ethan smiled politely. "I don't help people for rewards." Someone nearby had been watching. Sophia, still wearing dark sunglasses and casual clothes, she had secretly escaped her security team for one final walk through the city before the wedding. She had expected luxury boutiques. Instead, she found a young farmer giving away his food. Without cameras, without attention, without expecting anything. She couldn't stop staring. A little girl suddenly ran into traffic chasing a bright red balloon. A speeding delivery truck rounded the corner. People screamed. Everything happened in seconds. Ethan dropped every basket of vegetables. He sprinted. The truck's horn echoed through the street. Sophia gasped. Ethan reached the girl just before impact. He threw her onto the sidewalk. The truck missed him by inches. His shoulders slammed against the pavement. The market erupted into applause. The little girl hugged him tightly. "Thank you." Ethan smiled despite the pain. "Next time." He gently handed her the balloon. "Hold on tighter." Sophia felt tears gathering in her eyes. She had never seen courage that looked so effortless. Security guards finally surrounded Sophia. "There you are. We've been looking everywhere." She glanced back one last time. Ethan had already returned to collecting vegetables scattered across the road. No reporters. No applause. Just quiet humility. She whispered to herself, "Who are you?" She didn't know it yet. But in less than 6 hours, she would ask that same man to become her husband. The Harrington estate glowed like a palace beneath the evening sky. Luxury cars stretched for nearly half a mile. Television crews broadcast live. Business leaders, politicians, celebrities, international investors. Everyone important had come to witness what newspapers called the wedding of the century. Inside, Richard Harrington greeted guests with polished confidence. "This alliance will shape the future of our industries," he told a senator. Nearby, Victor Sterling laughed with investors. "It's not every day you marry $5 billion. His friends chuckled. None of them noticed Sophia standing alone at the far end of the ballroom. She watched smiling couples dance before the ceremony began. Not one smile reached her own lips. Emily quietly approached. "You still have time." Sophia shook her head. "My grandmother." Emily understood. No more words were needed. Outside the estate, Ethan drove past after leaving the farmer's market. His old pickup suddenly sputtered. Then the engine died. He sighed. "Not today." He coasted to a stop near the estate gates. Smoke curled from beneath the hood. The security guard frowned. "You can't park here." "I'm sorry," Ethan replied. "It broke down." "Move it." "What if it still ran?" Before the guard could argue further, an elderly chauffeur hurried over. His name was Thomas. He had served the Harrington family for more than 40 years. One glance told him Ethan wasn't causing trouble. Thomas smiled kindly. "I've got some tools." Together, the two men worked beneath the truck. After 20 minutes, the engine coughed back to life. Ethan grinned. "I owe you." Thomas wiped grease from his hands. "No, you reminded me of someone." "Who?" "My younger self." They shook hands. As Ethan prepared to leave, Thomas noticed something. The invitation envelope tucked beneath a nearby hedge had been blown there by the wind. Golden lettering shimmered under the estate lights. Without thinking, Thomas picked it up. "It belongs inside." He looked at Ethan. "Would you mind dropping this at the reception desk?" "My knees aren't what they used to be." Ethan hesitated. "I'm not dressed for a place like this." Thomas smiled warmly. "Kindness doesn't need a suit." Ethan accepted the envelope. "I'll be right back." He walked toward the grand entrance, unaware that one simple favor had just placed him at the center of a storm no one could stop. Inside the ballroom, the music suddenly stopped. And upstairs, Sophia made a decision that would shock an entire nation. Upstairs, behind the heavy oak doors of the bridal suite, Sophia Harrington stared at her reflection one last time. The elegant white gown fit her perfectly. The diamond necklace around her neck was worth more than Ethan's entire village. Yet she had never felt poorer. Outside, the orchestra began playing the wedding march. Emily stood beside the door, her eyes filled with concern. It's time. Sophia didn't move. Her hands trembled so violently that she could barely breathe. Then her phone vibrated. One message. From her father. Remember your grandmother. Nothing more. No heart. No encouragement. Just a reminder of the chains wrapped around her life. A single tear rolled down Sophia's cheek. I can't do this. Emily gently held her hand. Then don't. Sophia looked at her. If I walk away, my grandmother loses everything. Silence. The music grew louder. Guests applauded downstairs. Emily suddenly noticed something. Sophia wasn't looking at the mirror anymore. She was looking out the window, toward the entrance courtyard. A young man in dusty boots was walking through the front doors, carrying an invitation envelope. The same farmer. The same stranger who had risked his life for a little girl only hours earlier. Sophia whispered, "It's him." Emily frowned. Who? The man from the market. Sometimes the impossible doesn't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it walks through the front door wearing muddy boots. Ethan stepped cautiously into the Harrington estate. Everything sparkled. Crystal chandeliers reflected thousands of lights. A grand piano played softly in one corner. Servers in immaculate uniforms carried silver trays filled with champagne. He looked down at his worn jeans. I definitely don't belong here. Several wealthy guests glanced at him. One woman whispered, "How did he get inside?" Another man laughed. "Maybe he's delivering vegetables." Their laughter echoed behind him. Ethan ignored them. Thomas had asked him to return the invitation. That was all he intended to do. A receptionist accepted the envelope with a polite smile. "Thank you, sir." "No problem." He turned to leave. Then, a loud crash echoed from upstairs. Guests gasped. The orchestra stopped. Every eye lifted toward the grand staircase. Sophia stood there, not smiling, not glowing. Her face was pale, her breathing uneven. Richard Harrington frowned. "What are you doing?" Victor adjusted his tuxedo impatiently. "The ceremony has started." Sophia slowly descended the staircase. One step, then another. Each footstep felt heavier than the last. She reached the bottom and looked across hundreds of faces. Then, her eyes locked onto Ethan. The room seemed to disappear. No music, no whispers, only silence. Ethan looked behind him. She couldn't possibly be looking at him. Could she? She was. Richard's voice echoed through the ballroom. "Sophia." She didn't answer. Victor stepped forward. "What is this?" Still no answer. Instead, Sophia walked directly toward Ethan. The crowd instinctively moved aside. The distance between them shrank. 10 steps. 5. 3. She stopped inches away. Ethan looked completely confused. "Miss." Before he could finish, Sophia took off the diamond engagement ring, placed it into his rough hand, looked directly into his eyes, and whispered, "Will you marry me?" The ballroom exploded. No one could believe what they had just seen. Least of all, the farmer holding a billionaire's wedding ring. "What?" Ethan blinked in disbelief. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else." Sophia shook her head. "No, I know exactly who you are. You don't even know my name." "I know enough." Victor stormed across the ballroom. "Have you completely lost your mind?" Richard's face turned crimson. Sophia. She didn't look at either of them. Only Ethan. "You saved a little girl's life today. You helped a homeless veteran. You repaired an old man's car. You expected nothing in return." Ethan swallowed. "How do you know that?" "I saw everything." The ballroom fell quiet again. Sophia continued. "For years I've been surrounded by powerful men. They all wanted something. Money. Influence. Status." She gently closed Ethan's fingers around the ring. "You are the first man I've ever seen who wanted nothing." Ethan looked completely overwhelmed. "I don't understand." "You don't have to." She took a shaky breath. "I just need one answer. Will you help me?" Victor laughed. "This is pathetic." He pointed toward Ethan. "Look at him. He's filthy. He probably doesn't even own a suit." Several guests laughed. Ethan lowered his eyes. Not because he believed them, because he had heard words like that before. His entire life. Victor stepped closer. "Tell me, farmer, how much would it take? I'll pay you to disappear." The ballroom watched, waiting. Ethan slowly raised his head. "I wasn't raised to sell my dignity." The laughter stopped immediately. Victor smirked. "Then name your price." Ethan quietly placed the diamond ring on a nearby table. "You don't understand. I'm not for sale." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. For the first time in years, Someone had defended his own honor without using wealth. Richard Harrington suddenly realized. This poor farmer might be the one person money couldn't control. Richard approached slowly. His voice became calm again. Dangerously calm. Young man, what is your name? Ethan Carter. What do you do? I'm a farmer. Richard nodded. And how much debt do you have? The question stunned Ethan. Richard smiled slightly. I know everything. $47,000. Your farm is being foreclosed. Several guests chuckled. Richard continued. I can solve every problem you've ever had. Right now. Walk away. No one gets hurt. Ethan stared at him. The offer tempted him. $47,000. His parents' farm. His father's dream. Everything could be saved. He closed his eyes. For one brief moment, he imagined accepting. Then he remembered his father's voice. A man who sells his conscience becomes poorer than the poorest beggar. Ethan opened his eyes. I'm sorry. I can't. Richard's smile disappeared. You would throw away your future? Ethan answered quietly. No. I just won't buy it with someone else's pain. Sophia finally broke down crying. Nobody had ever chosen her. Over money. Nobody. The elderly chauffeur Thomas stepped forward unexpectedly. I've worked for this family 42 years. Everyone turned toward him. I've never spoken against Mr. Harrington. Richard glared at him. Thomas continued anyway. But the young man is right. Sophia deserves to choose. Gasps filled the ballroom. Richard shouted. You're fired. Thomas lowered his head. So be it. Ethan looked at the old man. A stranger. Willing to sacrifice 40 years of service for truth. Then, Sophia made the most shocking decision of the night. Sophia reached for Ethan's hand. Her fingers trembled. I know this sounds impossible. It is. I know we don't know each other. That's true. I know I'm asking you to risk everything. Yes. She looked into his eyes. But I also know one thing. If I marry Victor, I'll spend the rest of my life wishing I'd taken one chance. Tears streamed down her face. So, I'm asking. Not because you're rich. Not because you're handsome. Not because you're perfect. But because today, you proved your kind. The ballroom was silent enough to hear people breathing. Ethan searched her face. He saw fear, pain, honesty, not manipulation, not arrogance, just someone desperately reaching for hope. He asked one question. If I say yes, will this truly be your choice? Sophia answered immediately. Yes. No one else's. He nodded slowly. Then, I'll stand beside you. A wave of disbelief swept through the ballroom. Emily burst into tears. Thomas smiled. Victor looked ready to explode. Richard's hands shook with fury. Within minutes, using the legal officiant already present, Sophia and Ethan exchanged vows. Simple, quiet, no grand speeches, no extravagant promises. Only one. I will never treat you as property, Sophia whispered, and I will never forget today. They exchanged rings. The ceremony ended. Sophia Harrington became Sophia Carter, but while the newly married couple walked out together, someone hidden among the guests quietly made a phone call. Begin the next phase. The voice on the other end replied. Understood. The game had only just begun. The luxury wedding cars remained parked outside the Harrington estate. None of them belonged to Ethan. None of them were waiting for him. As photographers shouted questions and cameras flashed relentlessly, Ethan reached for Sophia's hand. Come with me. She looked at the endless line of expensive limousines. And where exactly are we going? Ethan smiled awkwardly. I actually drove here. He pointed toward an old green pickup truck with faded paint and a dented front bumper. Sophia stared at it for a second. Then she laughed. It wasn't the polite laugh she'd used at charity galas. It was genuine. For the first time in years. A reporter sneered loudly. The billionaire's daughter is leaving in a farm truck. Another added. This marriage won't last a week. Sophia heard every word. She simply opened the passenger door herself and climbed in. No hesitation. No embarrassment. Ethan looked at her. You know, you don't have to do this. She fastened the worn seatbelt. I already did. He started the engine. The pickup rattled loudly. Several guests laughed again. Sophia rolled down the window, smiled at them, and waved. The laughter stopped. Because she didn't look defeated. She looked free. Behind them, Richard Harrington watched the old truck disappear into the night. Then he turned to Victor. I gave her a choice. Victor's jaw tightened. Richard's eyes turned cold. Now it's my turn. The drive back to Green Hollow took nearly 3 hours. At first, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was simply unfamiliar. Finally, Ethan cleared his throat. I'm sorry. Sophia looked at him. For what? My truck doesn't have air conditioning. She blinked, then burst into laughter. You've apologized for the truck 3 times. I know. It's just. He scratched the back of his head. I never imagined bringing my wife home like this. The word wife hung in the air. Both of them noticed it. Neither said anything. Near midnight, the farmhouse came into view. Sophia stepped out of the truck and looked around. A weathered wooden porch. A small vegetable garden. An old swing hanging from an oak tree. Fireflies danced across the fields. The house wasn't grand. It wasn't elegant. But it felt alive. Ethan looked embarrassed. I know it's not much. She walked slowly onto the porch. Touched the old wooden railing. It's beautiful. He frowned. You don't have to pretend. I'm not pretending. She smiled softly. It's the first house I've ever seen that feels like someone actually lives here. Inside, Ethan lit a few lamps. The electricity flickered. Sophia looked around. Family photographs. Handmade quilts. Books with worn covers. A cracked piano in one corner. Nothing matched. Everything mattered. She picked up a framed picture of Ethan with his parents. They looked kind. They were. He looked at the photograph for a long moment. My father believed a person's wealth should be measured by the number of people who would cry if they were gone. Sophia lowered the frame carefully. My father measures wealth differently. That night, Ethan gave Sophia the bedroom. He spread an old blanket on the living room sofa. Around 2 in the morning, Sophia quietly opened the bedroom door. She found Ethan asleep. The blanket had slipped onto the floor. The room was cold. Without waking him, she gently covered him with another quilt. She stood there for a few seconds, watching. He looked peaceful. No guards. No assistants. No expectations. She smiled, then quietly returned to her room. Neither of them realized. Someone was watching the farmhouse from the darkness beyond the fields. The headlights disappeared before sunrise. But the tire tracks remained. Someone knew exactly where they lived. Back in Rivergate City, Richard Harrington sat alone in his office. The room was silent except for the ticking of an antique clock. Victor paced furiously. You embarrassed me. Richard didn't respond. You embarrassed both our families. Still nothing. Victor slammed his fist onto the desk. Say something. Richard slowly poured himself a cup of tea, then finally spoke. What did you lose tonight? Victor frowned. My bride. No. Richard looked directly into his eyes. You lost your pride. Victor's expression darkened. I'll destroy him. Richard calmly stirred his tea. Perhaps, but not emotionally. Victor looked confused. Richard continued. Poor people survive humiliation. They've lived with it their entire lives. If you want to break Ethan Carter, you take away hope. Across town, the foreclosure officer received an anonymous payment. Not to save Ethan's farm, to accelerate the legal process. Every technical delay vanished overnight. The auction date moved forward. 3 days. Not 2 weeks. 3 days. Meanwhile, another meeting was taking place inside a private hospital. Richard entered quietly. Sophia's grandmother, Eleanor, smiled warmly. You came. I always keep my promises. Richard handed the hospital director a folder. The director nodded respectfully. After Richard left, the smile disappeared from Eleanor's face. She opened the folder. Inside was only 1 page. A single sentence. Convince Sophia to return, or your treatment ends. Tears slowly filled the elderly woman's eyes. Far away, Sophia had no idea. The people she loved were already paying the price for her happiness. The next morning began before sunrise. Sophia woke to the sound of birds singing outside her window. She smiled. No alarm. No meetings. No security guards knocking on her door. Just morning. She walked outside barefoot. The grass felt cool beneath her feet. She closed her eyes. It's beautiful. Behind her, Ethan chuckled. You've never walked on wet grass before, have you? She opened one eye. Is it that obvious? A little. He handed her a steaming mug. Coffee. She took 1 sip. Immediately coughed. It's terrible. Ethan laughed so hard, he nearly dropped his own cup. I warned you. What is this? My father's recipe. It tastes like burnt dirt. He shrugged proudly. We call it farmer coffee. She laughed again. Never make this for guests. Later that morning, Ethan introduced her to the neighbors. Mrs. Jenkins hugged Sophia before she could say anything. So you're Ethan's wife. Sophia smiled awkwardly. I suppose I am. Mrs. Jenkins whispered loudly. He finally found someone prettier than his tomatoes. Everyone laughed. Sophia felt something unfamiliar. Acceptance. Nobody asked about her fortune. Nobody cared about designer brands. They only wanted to know if she liked homemade pie. She did. Very much. That afternoon, Ethan repaired a broken fence. Sophia tried helping. She missed every nail she aimed at. The hammer slipped. She accidentally hit the fence post, then nearly her own thumb. Ethan gently took the hammer. Here. He stood behind her, placed his hands over hers. Don't swing with your arm. Use your shoulder. Their faces were only inches apart. Neither spoke. For one brief moment. Time seemed to stop. Then, Mrs. Jenkins shouted from across the road. About time. Sophia immediately stepped away, blushing. Ethan nearly dropped the hammer. Mrs. Jenkins laughed all the way home. That evening, Sophia found an old wooden box hidden beneath Ethan's bed. Inside was a secret he had never shown anyone. Sophia carefully opened the box. Inside were dozens of notebooks. Every page was filled with sketches, modern irrigation systems, affordable farming machines, water-saving designs, solar-powered equipment, detailed calculations, business plans. She stared in amazement. Ethan, he froze. You weren't supposed to see those. Did you draw all of these? He nodded. Since I was 17. She flipped through another notebook. They're brilliant. He smiled sadly. They're impossible. Why? I never had money to build any of them. She looked at another design. This could help thousands of farmers. He shrugged. I know. Then why stop dreaming? He hesitated. Finally answered. Dreams are expensive. Sophia looked at him for a long moment. No. She closed the notebook gently. Giving up on them is. Their eyes met. Neither realized that, at the same moment, a black SUV had stopped at the edge of the property. Inside sat Victor Sterling, watching through binoculars. His smile was cold. They're happy. One of his men nodded. For now. Victor lowered the binoculars. Let's change that. As thunder rolled across the distant hills, another car sped toward Green Hollow. Inside sat an exhausted elderly woman clutching a hospital discharge bracelet. Sophia's grandmother had escaped the hospital after learning the truth. She had only one goal: to warn her granddaughter before it was too late. But she wasn't the only one heading to the farmhouse. Victor's men had already begun moving. And before dawn, someone would uncover a secret buried for more than 25 years. A truth that would shatter everything Ethan believed about his past. Rain began to fall just after midnight. Inside the farmhouse, Ethan was asleep on the old sofa while Sophia sat by the window, unable to rest. The peaceful life she had discovered over the past few days felt almost unreal. Headlights suddenly appeared on the dirt road. An old sedan stopped outside. Sophia hurried onto the porch. Eleanor. Her grandmother stepped out, weak and exhausted. Before Sophia could embrace her, Eleanor grabbed her shoulders. We don't have much time. What happened? Your father. Her voice trembled. He's coming after Ethan. At that moment, another pair of headlights appeared farther down the road. Black SUVs. Sophia's heart sank. They found us. Victor Sterling stepped out of the lead vehicle, holding an umbrella. I came to end this little fantasy. Several men followed him. Ethan walked outside and stood beside Sophia. What do you want? Victor smiled. Your signature. He held out legal papers declaring the marriage invalid. Sign these, walk away, and your debts disappear. Ethan looked at Sophia. She quietly shook her head. No. Victor sighed. I was hoping you'd say that. His men began tearing down the farm's wooden fence. One smashed a water pump. Another kicked over crates of vegetables. The neighbors rushed over. Mrs. Jenkins stood in front of Victor's men despite the pouring rain. If you want this farm, you'll have to go through all of us. One by one, more villagers arrived. They formed a line beside Ethan. Victor realized something he had never understood. Money could buy employees. It couldn't buy loyalty like this. He left with a warning. This isn't over. The next morning, the farm looked devastated. Broken fences, ruined crops, damaged equipment. Ethan knelt in the mud. I've failed. Sophia sat beside him. No. She opened one of his notebooks. You told me these machines could help farmers. They could. Then let's build one. He looked at her in surprise. With what money? She smiled. My father froze my accounts. I have almost nothing. She reached into her bag and removed her diamond necklace. The one thing I still own. Ethan stared at it. No, it's yours. She shook her head. It has always been a symbol of someone else's control. She placed it in his hand. I'd rather turn it into hope. Together they sold the necklace and built a working prototype from Ethan's designs. News spread quickly. Farmers from neighboring counties came to see it. Orders began arriving. For the first time in years, Ethan believed his dream might become real. That as their success grew, Eleanor called Ethan aside. There is something your parents wanted you to know. She handed him a worn envelope. It had been sealed for decades. Inside was a letter from Ethan's father. My son, if you're reading this, it means the truth can finally be told. 25 years ago, I worked for the Harrington family. One evening, I discovered evidence that innocent families were being forced off their land through corruption. Richard wasn't responsible, but powerful people around him were. I refused to stay silent. We left before they could destroy us. Protect your integrity. It will always be worth more than wealth. Ethan folded the letter carefully. Everything suddenly made sense. His father had never spoken about those years. Not out of shame, but to protect his family. Sophia read the letter in silence. We have to tell my father. Richard Harrington agreed to meet them in the headquarters of Harrington Industries. Victor arrived as well, convinced he would finally expose Ethan as an opportunist. Instead, Ethan quietly placed the old letter and several documents Eleanor had preserved on the conference table. Richard read them slowly. His face changed. The documents revealed that one of his former executives and Victor's father had secretly manipulated land acquisitions years earlier, hiding the fraud behind legitimate business deals. Richard looked at Victor. Did you know? Victor hesitated, then looked away. That was answer enough. Security officers entered the room. Victor tried to leave. He was stopped at the door. Richard spoke calmly. The authorities can decide the rest. Victor's ambition had finally become his downfall. Richard remained seated long after everyone else had left. Finally, he looked at Ethan. I judged you by your clothes. I judged you by your bank account. I never once asked what kind of man you were. Ethan answered quietly. My father taught me that people make mistakes. What matters is what they do next. Richard stood. I cannot undo the past. No, you can't. But you can change the future. Months later, Richard announced a new foundation that invested in small family farms, ethical agriculture, and rural education. He asked Ethan to help lead it. Ethan accepted on one condition. No family should ever lose their land because they are poor. Richard extended his hand. For the first time in many years. I agree. The farmhouse still stood beneath the old oak tree. Only now it had been repaired. Children played in the yard. The once empty barn had become a workshop where Ethan's affordable farming equipment was built and shipped across the country. Mrs. Jenkins still brought homemade pie every Sunday. Thomas, the former chauffeur, managed the workshop with pride. Emily visited often and laughed that she had never seen Sophia happier. One evening, Ethan and Sophia sat together on the porch watching the sunset. Do you ever miss the mansion? Ethan asked. Sophia smiled. I miss my grandmother's piano. She looked across the golden fields. But I don't miss the walls. He took her hand. What did this place give you? She leaned her head on his shoulder. A home. And you? He looked at the horizon. The courage to believe my dreams were never too small. Fireflies drifted across the fields as the sky turned orange and purple. The farmhouse, once on the edge of foreclosure, had become a place where neighbors gathered, inventions were born, and hope quietly grew. Sometimes the greatest fortune isn't measured in billions. It's measured in the people who stand beside you when you have almost nothing. And sometimes, the most extraordinary love begins with one impossible choice. True wealth is not found in power, status, or money. It is found in integrity, compassion, and the courage to choose what is right even when it costs everything. Kindness may seem small in the moment, but it has the power to transform lives in ways that wealth alone never can. If you enjoyed this story, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional stories like this.